Oh, I'm a good old rebel, now that's just what I am. For this fair land of freedom, I do not care a damn. I'm glad I fought against it, I only wish we'd won. And I don't want no pardon for anything I've done.
This is Rebel Yell, a Southern Nationalist podcast. I'm your host, Masonius Rufus. For our 200th episode of Rebel Yell, Joe Wasp, Dark Enlightenment, Ryan McMahon, Fuller Skipwith, and I talk about colonies while celebrating our 200th episode. Thanks. Well, let's get down to business. I'm glad everyone managed to get on, including Fuller. This is our 200th episode, and Wasp, you wanted to talk about colonies? Or is that the one that I chose of your two options?
Yeah, man. That's it.
Well, what is it that struck you? You're like, you wanted to talk about colonies again? You know, my favorite subject, the opiate of the Rufus.
Well, I thought it would be a really cool topic for a 200th episode. And also, it's something that I think, we in the Dissident need to start taking a little bit more seriously.
Yeah.
I just figured it was kind of time for a podcast episode on actual colonies.
Okay, yeah. Well, I seem to remember that there was someone that was talking about how he had a bunch of family living around him, and you wanted to go a step further and say, well, that's not really, a colony needs to be what? It needs to be not just a hamlet for a clan. It needs to actually be a bunch of different families. We'll start with what is your idea of what a colony should be? Let's start there, Joe.
Okay, well, I figured
let's let Joe begin.
I can define it.
Okay, well, I was actually hoping we'd start with, what our ideas on what a colony would be. I think, of course, you'd have to start small, but I think the end idea of what a colony would actually be would be like a literal, town. Like that would be kind of the end goal, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Well,
I know. Go ahead.
Yeah, when you're done, hand it off to Dark. We got 5 people, so we're all going to get in and get our say.
Okay, well, the best actual example I can think of when it comes to an actual colony, is of course, the obvious dissident, example of Orania, South Africa.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
That's usually what I think of when I'm thinking colony, just a town, or our guys, our people. A literal physical home, away from a lot of the really stupid, corrupt crap that goes on in every single town and city that we have across the South now.
Well, and you want to hand it off to Dark? I'm sure he'd love to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that to get it started was all.
Dark?
A colony is a place where, in the modern context, to my mind, it has 3 characteristics. 1, money comes in, it does not go out. So if Rufus and Fuller and I all have a colony, right, and Rufus is a plumber, I pay Rufus to do all my plumbing, and I'm a roofer, and he pays me to do all his roofing. That's internally swapping, but we'll do outside work and bring money in. So that has to be an economic plus. It has to be consist of families. You can't have a colony of a bunch of single dudes. That's called a war band, and that's a different show topic. Colonies have families with women and children. And the third thing is that there's a clear boundary between us and the rest of the world. So if it's 50 families and you're part of those 50 families, then you're in. If you're not, you're treated as an outsider. So, you got to go get money from the rest of the world, bring it in, and then swap it internally. And what that does over time, right, is increases your wealth because money's coming in but not going out, right? It's high trust because you have a very strong in-group centered way of doing things, and you have an ability to provide a safe place for families to come up so that they're not so exposed to the vagaries of the world. That would be my, quick definition. Because, a place with 50 married people, 50 married couples and children is a lot more stable than, 25 single guys, 15 wives, and 10 live-in girlfriends. That's a recipe for disaster, right? So you have to have families, you have to have, external, like, take advantage of outsiders mentality, and you have to have the ability to, draw a sharp line between you and everyone else. That'd be my working definition.
Very good. Now let's go to Fulwer. Would you like to jump in, Fulwer, or should I go to? There you are.
I was listening to Darks and trying to come up with what I could do to change it, but I actually said more or less exactly what I was going to say in more detail. I think that nails it, anthropologically, and in any other sense I might try to deny it. I might try to define it. So, I'll pass the ball on.
Okay, well, let's go to Ryan. Welcome back to the show, Ryan. It's been a little while since you've been on. It's good to hear you.
Oh yeah. It seems like I usually when you think of colonies, like maybe you think of old European civilization expanding itself. We're kind of doing like an anti-colony where we're in the midst of a large civilization trying to break away from it, make our own secluded one. So like it's just for like the purpose of telling someone what we're doing. Yeah, we're making a colony in the midst of this crumbling country. But it's sort of like an anti-colony if you want to get like real picky about it.
Yeah, actually, and I'll just to ruin the batting order and everything else, I'll hop in, and I would say that what Dark defined, I think, is the perfect definition of a mature colony. That's what you want the end stage to look like. And I've told people before, whenever I dump the idea on them, and they go, "Well, that sounds preposterous," and I'm like, "No, it used to be a real thing. They're called towns." And, but I do think, that, the final product is not not necessarily what you can expect to see beforehand. And I think we're in a sort of unique position, especially with information technology, financial technology, service technology that we have. We have the Internet of Things coming, that we have this, we could have the situation where a colony initially is spiderwebbed, across a much larger area than you want it to be initially. And so I think part of colony formation definitely has to be, well, what if you have the 50 families? What if your 50 families that you want in this colony are right now 50 single dudes? You also have to include in the process, how are they going to find one another, and how are they going to scratch together all of the stuff that they need to, eventually form that final product. And so it's, the only thing I would add is that it's an evolutionary concept, man. It's more like a process.
Well, it's definitely something you'd have to build over a long-term period.
Well, I think those are all good answers. Ryan, do you want to jump back in, or shall I take it?
Yeah. Like the old colonies were originally dependent on the home country until they became self-sustaining, and then it just wasn't really a colony anymore. So our end goal isn't necessarily a colony, but like a colony is what we're going to be starting with.
Yeah, well, colony, the reason why we use colony, obviously, is because, commune, it sounds like, a hippie, left-wing, totalitarian nightmare, to the average, to our constituents, middle-class people that work for a living. And, you don't want to compound, that's what the press will call it if you ever get in trouble with the police. They'll call it a compound. The colony idea is that, imagine that we're living in a wilderness, and we're going to set up and build civilization in this wilderness. You usually call those colonies, right? Well, we are living in a wilderness. Like you said, Ryan, we're living in the ashes, the carcass of a dying civilization, and we want order, stability, rule of law, all the things our ancestors built. We want it back, and you're not going to get it asking the system for permission. You're not going to get any of those things. The beautiful thing about the colony idea, even though you're literally asking people to do the hardest thing in the world, with the colony strategy, build a civilization from scratch. That is as hard as it gets. But the beautiful thing about it is, you don't have to ask anyone's permission. It's the only way that you're going to be able to live in a civilized country in your lifetime. It's the only way you're going to be able to see it. Really. It's the only way you're going to live in a society that has your values. It's the only way. We've spent our lifetimes, and our parents' generation did the same thing, watching everything get worse. And what did we do? We asked the system for it not to get worse. And it just got worse because the system, it's not built upon our consent. It manufactures our consent. It manages our opinion. It's the opposite of what they told us in social studies or civics class, if you had one of those. So this is the way. And it starts off primitive, and it doesn't even need houses at first. You can start it in campers if you wanted to. But the first thing that comes first is having an entity, which is basically, and Allah forgive me for using this word, a democracy. Where you all are like, hey, you're all going to have your private property, your camper, your chattels, whatever. Those are yours, and we're going to recognize that. But we're going to have a common property that we all own together as people. And how do you own together? How do you own a common, will, where we get the word commonwealth? How do you own it? How do you manage it? Well, through primitive Anglo-Saxon democracy, baby. Juries and wardens and, town meetings and select men and committees and all that crap. Okay. And you can form that entity before you actually own any land together. In fact, you about have to. So, the colonies, the reason why I love the colonies, even though it's really big step 3, right? But what's big step 2 is forming an association, organization. We'll just call it how about a guild? It's a simple word, easy to say, a guild, where we could own things together, and this organization, it can start with, paper and assets. We provide each other some sort of service together. How about unemployment insurance? That would be great for right wingers. Or how about, heck, we can make a 501c3 and get grandfathered in as a health share, provide each other health insurance. Whatever we do, we're going to be providing real goods and services instead of simply talking about it, which is what every right-wing organization our whole lives has done, mostly, right? It's just talk, right? Talk about, how they want this or that. Well, put your money where your mouth is. What matters is putting clothing on, your brother's children. That's what matters, right? Getting braces, for your kids, economics, money, services. Actually taking care of people, that's what matters. And so you need an association, a guild, I'll use that word, to do that. And then once you get used to managing funds and assets together, and you get used to voting, Allah forgive me for saying the word vote. But you're going to have to do that to manage common property. Once you do that with the association, the guild, then you build colonies. And they are one single piece of private property so far as Uncle Sam is concerned. We're not talking about a regular township corporation where everyone is building on Uncle Sam's right-of-way, right? Because, used to be those were like colonies in the 19th century. There was a lot of local Jeffersonian sovereignty to where those towns could have all sorts of rules and ordinances to live the way they wanted to live and to make sure that only people like themselves would live there. That's the way it used to be, but it's not that way anymore. Restrictive covenants have been shot down, etc. So, and just real quick, and then I'll hand it off. For nationalists, we have an overwhelmingly nationalist audience. I would say this is called national anarchism. It has a tradition, and it's groups of nationalists that build little communes to survive because they think the future is very dark for their ethnic group, and they're not wrong. And for libertarians, you can think of it as Heathian anarchism. And what's Heathian anarchism? Well, it's the idea that a community is just like any other service. And so, in the future, communities are going to be competing to provide the best services to the customer. Okay. So this collective entity is just providing a better service than the AirSats communities that we have today. And it can start in co-housing in a house. It can start in an abandoned old motel where all the the interstate's taking all the traffic away from it. The key, it could start small, but the key is you're providing collective services, the services that our communities don't provide very well anymore. And so that's my beginning piece, and I'll hand it off we'll go to Joe, and then we'll go to Dark.
Well, there's really a lot to unpack with what you said. Man, where do you start? I guess it's really kind of like, I guess you mentioned Rome. You're basically doing that. Think of it like Rome wasn't built in a day, right? So you think of it kind of like that. Something like that, but a bit more of a, I hate to use the left's term, safe place or safe space for various like-minded Southerners who don't like seeing, Confederate monuments removed, and they like rebel flags and stuff like that. And they don't like their kids being in the, awful education system that we have. And also something you said, well, you don't want to actually be like an official township. And it's like, well, you can basically have a bunch of guys, not a bunch of guys, but say a bunch of these families congregate into what would be like a town, but you just don't incorporate.
Well, just real quick, you incorporate, but you do it as a private entity. Okay. And then, it's a private town is what we're talking about. Now, we'll talk about commerce and how you can do that locally. But, the first phase is, look, we can live there in campers. We can live there in tents, whatever. The first structure would probably be something like a church, an assembly building, which is a church on Sunday. It's a school Monday through Friday. It's lodge for the men and then lodge for the women on the weeknights. It's an assembly for the town on Saturday. It's one big building that's all these things. And that would be, probably the first structure that you build. And it's multi-purpose because you don't have a lot of resources to waste. But we'll talk about commerce here after we get through this round, how you can do that.
Yeah, and it's like, you start small like that because inevitably, it's like you said, you're basically building a brand new civilization from scratch, but within another one, right? So yeah, that's what, it starts that way, but it will grow. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah. Dark, you want to jump in?
Oh, I was just going to say that what we need to understand is not that necessarily that there are people who are doing this who are successful already. Our problem is not that we live in a society that is falling apart and you're going to have to create something in it. Not so much democracy is the problem as just you look at co-housing units and they're all leftists and they're all lawsuits because they have an egalitarian view of the world where they think everyone is the same and everyone is equal, and that's obviously just not true. But what we do need to do is, and this is why it's important for families, is if you're going to make something like this work, there has to be, all the dads are equal.
Exactly.
Right. And it's when we say voting, we do not mean, the single mom just to stand at the town meeting and be like, who's going to feed my kids? Right. We have to be very, very careful about who exercises sovereignty because, frankly, being uncareful about that's what killed the United States of America.
Yeah. It's more like a weapon take. What the the Norse use the word weapon take. I forget what the Anglo-Saxon word for it is. But, where all the men in the militia gather, and, voting would be more like you all touch your spears together and you say, I want this guy to be the chief. Okay. And I know that sounds medieval, and it is medieval, but that's the way our ancestors did it for centuries, and they were able to create us. And, say what you will about it. It led to all the good things that we think of today. And you can't say the same thing about what we got today. What we got today leads to death. It leads nowhere. So,
Right. And so when we, and the other thing that co-housing units run into is because there's no one in charge, right? We need to use that old style democracy where, there's the chief and then there's his retinue, his thing, where the guys who are, contributing are giving advice, but then when he says, this is the way it's going to be, that's the way it's going to be. We need to be very, very careful about that. There's some legal, consult your local attorney, etc. But really, we need to be extremely conscious of the fact that everything around us is failing.
Yeah, well, thankfully for us, private arbitration is accepted by our courts because they're such failures. They're such failures at doing their original job. So, imagine that corporate entity, the guilds, and you just have a private arbitration clause that says, look, we're Christians, and as Christians, we don't believe in going to Caesar's courts. It's right there. And, John, Matthew, it's in this letter of Paul, 1 Corinthians, this is our procedure. And you just have a very simple procedure where you start off with, negotiation, and then you go to mediation, and then conciliation, then you go up to arbitration, and then that's it. Okay. And, that's it. You have now created a parallel court system that is recognized by the courts of the United States because they've, they don't want to deal with all the headaches of having to do their job. And, it's in several, a lot of these, nonprofits have arbitration clauses. Some of them are detailed. Some of them are not very detailed. Some of them just say, hey, we're going to do it by whatever, the American Arbitration Institute, whatever rules. Some of them are like, well, we're just going to do it by the Christian Arbitration Institute rules or something. And, that's it. That's the clause in the contract that you agreed to, So, I don't think we'll have a problem, because the courts don't want to deal with these headaches. And, if you start off with Christians of the same ethnic background, of the same, fundamental beliefs, traditional Christian beliefs, then you can handle it, I think. And I will say this, it's like I've never done any of this, for money, right? This is like a labor of love. I'm a slave to doing what's right here. And, I think that's the way it should be for, leaders in the community. When, an Amish, old order Amish bishop is chosen, through their weird Bible allotment system, once they do that, it's common for their wives to start crying, because it's not you get to lay around and tell other people what to do. It's service. Okay. It's getting up at 3 a.m. to sit with someone who's dying. Okay. It's doing a lot of work that you don't get paid for. Okay. So, I don't think there's going to be, everyone wants to be in charge, but when they realize that you got to serve, to make these decisions, most people are going to bow out. They're going to let whoever does that, someone else. That's someone else's deal. All right. I'm here to make money and to live a good life and drink beer. All right. I'm not going to get up at 3 a.m., to write some sort of warrant or to sit with a dying person. In Switzerland,
right?
What'd you say, Ryan?
You're going to be with your hot wife in Switzerland making money.
Right, yeah. Well, most people are like that.
Base Nick Fuentes.
Implying he'll marry a woman.
Did I talk about that last time?
No, you didn't.
I feel like I did talk. Did you all see that?
You mentioned it on the last show, and then you said that, and I'm thinking, like, isn't this dude gay?
Yeah, I was like, what the?
His wife's gonna have a dick. That's what's gonna happen.
Oh, the classic rhyming man.
He's finally joined. He's gonna have a wife with a dick. You could tell he's getting ready for a career in the Republican Party.
Well, he has talked about traps are gay, but they're, we have to be nuanced, is what he has said. Direct quote. So when old Nicky Boy says traps are unacceptable, I think he does protest too much.
No, Nick Fuentes has to be gay. I mean, you have to be gay to ride that many coattails into popularity. I mean, that's the only reason that guy has a base at all, is because he does nothing but ride coattails.
Well, I mean, he'll fit right into the Republican Party, right?
Yeah, you got to ride more of a coattails to get high up in the Republican Party, though.
Yeah. If you like cat boys, you're a Republican. So
based in trad.
yeah.
That's what these
You see,
people.
the ancient Greeks
The
used to dress
Catholic
little
way.
boys in girls' outfits before having sex with them. So this is actually like, we're restoring Western civilization here.
Are we going to go hard against Republicans and their twink farms right now, or are we going to stay on topic?
Well,
Yeah,
the Republicans are responsible for, the majority of our Confederate imagery removal. So
Yeah, oh no, you're right. You're right. It's if the Republicans, if they weren't fake, if they didn't lie to us our whole lives, we wouldn't be in this horrible situation.
I would tell them they should go build their own twink colony, but they've got one. It's Washington.
Right. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, Republicans. Yeah.
Yeah. Can I just say, it galls me that everyone who works in the Biden White House has been fired for doing drugs, when doing drugs is the most common thing that people have been doing in Washington for at least the last 60 years.
For marijuana, though.
Kennedy was stoned his entire presidency. He's been the best Democratic president of the last 100 years.
The Washington drug is cocaine. You got to do that. That makes you productive.
Oh, okay. Cocaine and Adderall.
Marijuana makes you lazy, right? I can't have bums working as staffers.
Do you think the average, the constituents of the Republican Party, do you think they, most of them are completely in the dark about what sort of creatures of the night represent them in D.C.?
They have no idea, dude.
No, I don't know. I'd say people. Do what now?
I was gonna say that was the whole problem with QAnon. It's like, oh shit, we're being found out.
Yeah.
No, I'd say, after the whole recent presidential election, I've seen a lot more people wake up. I just think I don't know. People have just sold their souls to the Republican Party. Like they cannot conceive of the idea of voting for anything else.
Well, dude, people can't even conceive an outside the system strategy. They can't think outside the system at all. Remember, if you want to do anything other than, I don't know, public protests and activism, then you're doing nothing. You're doing nothing. Activism is the only thing we can do. Asking other people's permission, trying to change other people's minds, is the only thing you can do. Otherwise, you're just doing nothing. And that's the cancer.
To be fair, I don't see as much of that as I used to.
Yeah, well, I've just seen a bunch of it.
I do still see a lot of people that want to engage in activism for some reason. And look, I know the aristocrat lark, yada, yada, but activism is trashy. Like, you can even go back to the 1960s and see all of those pictures of people, all those videos of people, the hippies and everything. It's trashy. It's trashy. Don't do it. It makes you look like white trash. Okay, that's my.
Yeah, nobody has ever really liked that public activism stuff from just like a regular standpoint. No one's ever really liked it. Whether you were in the hippies or the Klan or anything. I mean, any kind of activism like that. Yeah, you're right. It looks pretty trashy, and people who engage in it are usually pretty low class.
Well, there's some.
You got to have a lot of spare time to wander around in the middle of the street on a work day.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I did do an interview with Revolt Through Tradition, and they're trying to do avant-garde, under the radar activism today. So I don't want to totally rail on activism. The real economic problem with activism, is that, those Antifa that set Minneapolis on fire, that are attacking the courthouse in Portland right now, they all got their meal tickets punched to work in corporate America. They did not hurt their earning potential by doing that, right? I mean, they look like freaks and mutants and losers, but they're actually increasing their earning potential by doing all this because they're doing it for the powerful, for corporate America. When a right winger goes out and says, I love me some Jesus and I don't think it's cool to cut off, to castrate little boys, he is ruining his earning potential. He's hurting his income, which means that he's going to have fewer children if he can get married, because he can't afford to have more children. right? He can only afford to have one or two because he's hurt his earning potential. And so he is destroying his bloodline, which is what, which is what our enemies want anyway. They want to destroy us physically. They hate us for our ethnicity and our God, and so that's the real problem with it, is you're destroying yourself economically. There is no symmetry between left and right at all. So, the way out of hell as a right winger is very different than the way out of hell as a left winger. A left winger gets on the Soros bus and his life starts improving. There is no, if you get on a bus to DC, for the Republican Party, and you're a young, idealistic, young man, you could get sexually assaulted by your Republican mentors. There is no symmetry between left and right. The way out, for our people is to concentrate on, a non-political, quote unquote, solution. There is no political solution. Okay. We have to build, these colonies are the only way you're going to live in anything that resembles the country that you thought you lived in when you were young. And I'm sorry to get out so dark, and to bring us back to topic, but I mean, that is the neo-reactionaries were right about activism.
Well, and it's not even,
and just being,
and it's not a apocalypse. I mean, I've talked about this for years. I think probably the most famous podcast I've ever done was the Colonies episode. I strongly encourage all that. I want to talk about just how much nicer it would be on a day-to-day basis. Can you imagine how cool it would be to just live in a sane place where you could go just grab a beer with the boys after work, like a sane person who lived in a sane country?
That would be nice.
They didn't want to just talk about what's on TV.
Right.
Yeah.
And to use a perfect example, Ryan, you should be familiar with, any of y'all know how many, Mormon cities that were planted in the American West failed?
0?
Correct, sir. Brigham Young was a genius when it came to how to plan a town. And they had a set formula of, day 1, plant the potatoes. Day 2, do this other thing. Day 3, dig the irrigation ditch so that you could water the potatoes that you just planted on day 1. And the first year you could live in a sod hut. By year 5, it had to be, a clapboard house. By, year 10, it had to have some other improvement. And what you do, right, in a situation where something actually functions is you don't bet the entire farm on, at once. So right now, wherever you live, your entire economy, if you live in South Florida, is based off of, if you live in Central Florida, your entire economy is based on, the Devil Mouse theme park is going to bring in 5 million people a year. And if that doesn't happen, people are hurting really bad, right? If you don't, if Los Angeles, like Disneyland isn't a thing, then all of a sudden you're in real trouble because people didn't go to Disneyland this year. So that's, if you make those small bets, if you do you have a real diversity of income, or not of incomes, of a real diversity of economic activity, a real diversity of actual what people do for a living in a colony where, one guy's a plumber and one guy's an IT guy, and et cetera, then you're actually living in a place that's functional and sustainable. So, it's not even just so much that, this is the only place where your grandkids are going to be born. It's the only place that you're going to be able to have a functioning society in 5 years.
Yeah, when we do Brazilification, as we go further and further along Brazilification, we're going to, they live in gated communities anyway down there, because it's just anarchy. And not the good kind, outside the walls of their gated communities. Yeah.
They take helicopters
it'd be kind of nice
to community too. They can't drive.
What'd you say about driving?
I was just saying it'd be nice to live in a community where the only way okay, let me rephrase that. It'd be nice to live in a community in which it doesn't only expand by means of subdivisions. There's actual community and town planning.
Yeah, well, Savannah is one of the few planned cities that stuck to its plan, or at least old Savannah, and it's very beautiful, isn't it?
Like, it'd be nice to live in a town that isn't just some ungodly eyesore.
Yeah, I think there's a lot we could say here. When you begin, it's the men who are going to be going out, earning a living, and then bringing home the bacon, right? And you mostly want, and you can do this if you work collectively, you want to start off with, stay-at-home moms. It's very difficult for Americans to do that now, but if we collectively bear each other's burdens, through the traditional means of, what are the benefits of cooperatives and mutuals, et cetera, which are the entities that we're talking about, cooperatives, mutuals, that sort of thing. Well, it allows you bulk purchasing, babysitting, where the women rotate and, babysitting. You can have, one, like churches do this. Imagine that like a 15-passenger van, church van, takes the women to the big box store so they can get the deals with all the coupons that they sat around and clipped. Right? You can save a lot of money, collectively if you work at it as a group of people. And so you can actually afford, even if a young husband doesn't make that much money right now, by working with the others that are like him, he can make sure that he has a stay-at-home wife, a homemaker from the beginning, which is what you want. And the women need to be there, to be educating the kids in that, co-op? What do you call the, homeschool co-op that starts right there in the church building at the center?
I have a perfect, no, that's not what you want them doing. You want them employed. And here's how. Let's say your little Susie homemaker majored in English. Well, she's going to teach English to the homeschool co-op. And all the other moms are going to take that state money they get for homeschooling their kids and say, well, I didn't major in English, and little Susie homemaker over here has a degree in English and she teaches English. Well, maybe I got a degree in math. You're going to take that state money and you're going to give it to each other every day. You want them home and you want them doing all this other stuff too, but don't forget that there's an opportunity here with COVID and everybody homeschooling and staying at home. There's an opportunity to take some money out of Washington's pocket or state capital's pocket and put it in your pocket. So take it.
Yeah. Yeah. The Jews of, Kiryas Joel in Orange County, New York, I forget what kind of Haredi Jews they are. I bet they're Yiddish speakers is what I'd guess. But, they all have to walk to synagogue on Saturday. So, they can't drive. So that makes the community very walkable. They live on top of each other, so they could all walk to that synagogue, which is pretty large. A rule like that would be quaint and nice. You got to walk to church, on Sunday morning. But they also, they're maltsters is the word. I mean, it's a difficult word to say, but M-U-L-C-T, maltst. It's when you, you seek rent as, like a cheater. And I'll just mention this because it would be irresponsible not to mention this. Okay. They have religious marriages and they don't care one whit what Caesar thinks about their religious marriages. They don't care, because he's not the one who determines what a marriage is. It's the rabbis. And so, they take advantage of that to pretend that they're all single mothers and they get all that wig and all that free stuff because the U.S. government loves single mothers, loves them to death, and throws all sorts of hard-earned money at them, that were earned by white guys, right? Tax money. And, so they just take it. And so they got the highest welfare use of any county in the United States. And that includes like Native American counties, and it's because they set out to do it. Now, I'm not suggesting you do that necessarily, but that's thinking outside the box, ain't it? And that is not identifying with the United States.
Somehow they can afford to have 9 kids apiece.
Right, because we're paying for it.
Well, if someone wants to pay you to have 9 kids, not those people.
Right. Ryan, jump in.
We're probably not going to be able to pull that off. They'll eventually figure it out and just stop paying us.
Right.
Also, you shouldn't be living off that model because it's not self-sustaining. It's a parasitic model. So when the thing they're parasiting off of goes away, they're all done.
Yeah, and you would have to deal with this. There's a lot of the reason why it works for them is because they lose everything if they get shunned, right? Because that's the only thing they've ever known, right? They've only known other Haredi Jews. They lose their sisters, their brothers, their parents, their husbands, etc. if they get shunned, and so they will obey, even though it's the woman that's bringing in the income. She will obey the community that's ruled by the elders. Right, because she doesn't want to lose the community. Well, imagine you're building one of these colonies if you start out on an unsustainable model like that. Well, she's got the money coming in, and her marriage isn't recognized, right? And she's mad because, you won't let the women vote in the assembly. Well, she can just leave. She's already getting, and she'll take the kids, right? So, yeah, and I would actually, this is a separate topic, but I'm like, you need to play like the government hates you for your race and your God, and they want to genocide you because they really do. The thing I've been saying for years is real. They really do, right? And you can predict it with 100% certainty. So, to me, you need to start off with a nonprofit entity because it forces democracy on you. But I don't know if the colonies will be for-profit or be nonprofit or for-profit entities because, the Heathian anarchism is for profit. And why do I say that? I say that because the more taxes you pay, the more Uncle Sam is off your back, right? If he thinks if you're hiding taxes from him, he'll be on your back. Go on forward.
What is the source of profit? Leave that aside for a minute. I've been talking about this. I was talking about this with Adam from Midst of the 20th a couple of days ago. And then in another group where, because everybody knows none of my material is original. I just steal talking points from various, chat groups that I'm in and, thread them together like popcorn on a Christmas tree. And that's how I make podcast episodes, but, we were talking about how to break out of the suburban trap. And again, just pushing this again back towards, the formation aspect and not necessarily the quote unquote mature colony, because really what we've just said here is that we're going to grab women, throw them in a trap, and socially isolate them until they don't know anything else and don't have anywhere to go. Should they choose to leave? Not opposed to this.
Well, amen.
But
hallelujah.
But
well, the way you were wording it was starting to sound negative.
Right, you say that like it's a bad thing.
Yeah, man. You were saying it like it was a bad thing, and I was like, this is not bad at all.
Well, you do have to come up with a way to convince, because I was talking about this with several different groups of people, and they were talking about how they'd love to leave. This is one of these things. Men tend to be more adventurous. Women tend to be more conservative and more social, more socially oriented. And a number of guys, that I know are, they're in their 20s or they're, mid 20s to early 30s, and they're married and they have a kid, and, there are things that are preventing them from being able to do any of this right now. And one of them is because they already have a kid, they can't, unmarried young men can cohabitate with, they can move in and, you can go get a job in the oil fields and work for a year. And then, you got $60,000, $70,000, jangling around your pocket. And you can live on that for a while, until you manage to create something for yourself. But if you have a wife, and you have a kid, you already have stuff that you're obligated to do. And one of the things that you have to keep cash flow coming for wife and child. And then, a lot of these women, whenever they get, especially, they get married, they got married to somebody in their hometown, or, in, let's say, Longview, California, like Long Beach, California, or, Lansing, Michigan, or New Orleans or somewhere like that. And they, when they got married, moving across the country to join a rural commune was not in the contract.
Well,
and
who's talking about moving?
So you gotta.
I mean, the great thing about the association or guild is because you can start owning collective assets wherever you're at in life, right? You just go to the club, the lodge, right? And then it's going to be that group
no
of
one's
people.
moving right now because we have nowhere to move to as of today.
Right.
By the time we get a place to move to, you're going to want to move there because just what's going to be around you if you're staying.
Well,
Yeah, so one of the big,
it's going to be California all over the country, so you're going to want to leave that.
Well,
there has to be a prime mover here. There has to be an initial incentive. Otherwise, and I do think this is,
it's the co-op, Fuller. It's the co-op. It's like if you try to homeschool your kids, right? You're going to find out that, the man has to work and earn a lot of money to pay for all those kids. And then the woman, the wife has to spend all this time. It's a lot of work, right? And the co-op will help you, right? It will reduce the amount of work and give her more leisure to do other things. It's the economic incentives that drive everything. And there are serious economic incentives.
But I also think that I do think that dashing the idea of forcing the state to pay you, something like, say $15,000 a kid or something like that instead of give it to public schools. I don't think it's an idea you can dash off so quickly because that is a huge influx of capital. Well, of course, I just a little while ago, I was like, activism is trashy. But, I think there's something there. And I think a lot of different groups, could stick their hand in that pot and come out with something they like. And if you're operating on the assumption that the American state is going to collapse anyway, then why not join the smash and grab?
Well, no, I mean, I agree with you, Full, but it's going to be the elders of of this entity that determine which way they got to go. I mean, they got to ride the tiger, right? Sometimes maybe some sort of, what would you call this? Some sort of rent seeking or mulched opportunity will present itself and they'll go for it. Yeah, but the important thing, before you do all this, you need to really think seriously about collective ownership. I mean, there are all these different entities, and right-wingers basically, they don't know anything about them because they always think of starting a business, a for-profit business, and being a sole proprietorship, right? They don't really, and if they own stock, if they own part of a company, it's merely an asset, a hold of value. It's not like they really want to freaking vote for who a director is, okay? They're not owning a stock so they can practice, Anglo-Saxon democracy, joint stock company style. Okay. That they don't have, look at, say you started a credit union, which is a cooperative bank. It's a form of cooperative banking. As long as a simple majority of, the users, say you had a simple majority of the users were your people. Well, that leaves you up to like 49%, that could be, the outsiders. That you're sort of making money off of. These entities, this is how rich people think. Rich people think about, like Bill Gates created a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and then a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust. What are the differences between those two entities? How do they interplay? Right? Well, this is how the rich think. They think all about owning assets and they think about how this entity is tax privileged in this way. This entity is tax privileged in that way. How can I combine them to have the maximum power and income? Well, if you sit down and really learn how the rich do this in the United States, well, then you can start playing with power. Now, Bill Gates can do it because he's an individual that's a billionaire. Right. So it behooves him to learn how these entities work so that he can, just use paper and parchment and assets to grow his fortune instead of being a tech entrepreneur. Right. But we can start playing this game too, because once you start getting a whole bunch of people put money into a pot, well, then suddenly you can start acting like a rich guy. You can start playing with entities, which is perfectly legal. It's perfectly legal. Like-kind exchanges. Parking your money in municipal bonds to avoid taxation. That's how, what was his name? Warren Burger said that he paid less taxes than his secretary. Well, who not Warren Burger. That was a Supreme Court justice.
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. That's it. These people are using magic, the magic of entities, to do this. And the future is wide open. Hybrids. We're going to have Mozilla Firefox is a hybrid. It has a nonprofit that owns a for-profit. Yes. The for-profit sells, the user of the browser, their information to the merchants who want to advertise to them. And instead of paying taxes to Uncle Sam, it donates money to that 501c3 that owns it, whose mission is just to improve the browser, right? So it's self-dealing, and it's perfectly legal.
Can I give you a good something to actually?
Yeah, I got a couple things I want to say too.
Yeah.
So for where you talk about if you're a young fellow right now and you're in Appalachia, okay, there's not a lot of economic opportunity, but you do have two things that are actually in your favor. You got gravity and you got rural and land. So if you can get cheap hydropower, small scale hydro, and set up a Bitcoin miner, in rural Appalachia, and if that's where you're from, right? There you go. There's your basis of the.
That is exactly the kind of stuff that that you sort of need to have happening. I'm just pointing out again, everything costs money.
Right.
You got to get to and it's as nice as it is to believe that, say, in DeSoto County, Mississippi, that you're going to find enough people to form your colony right there, and you're all going to be right there together. I mean, the fact is that initially, there's 5 people in this call right now. None of us are in the same state. This is all spread out, and it's going to take some finagling, and it's going to take some money, and it's going to take some incentive.
You're going to have to be extremely Jewish with the system. Let's just go ahead and say that.
Yeah. Well, no, just the guild, man. We could meet online. We could have a meeting of minds, but you're going to have something like, I don't know, the Knights of Columbus or the Freemasons or one of those, a fraternal benefit society, whatever, to be providing real benefits, collective benefits to people wherever they are in life. You live on the outside of Nashville and commute in, to work. Well, you could still, especially, with Skype, you could still attend all sorts of meetings with your bros where you're scheming and you're throwing money into, your money market account, and you have a contract written up, saying what you're going to do with it. You're going to provide unemployment insurance, like, bread funds from the Netherlands. That's one I stumbled across. A group of 30 to 50 people, that are all self-employed, providing unemployment insurance for years in case one of them gets sick. It's all voluntary and it's all by contract, right? You can provide real benefits. And the reason why this collective, and then we'll jump to Joe Wasp. Just let me finish real quick. The reason why you got to think in that nonprofit, cooperative, almost socialistic manner is because there is no free market where people are competing to provide you cheaper goods and services or better goods and services. It's all been destroyed by Uncle Sam. All right? Uncle Sam has made sure there is no costless, there are huge barriers to entry into any market. If you're a plutocrat, you're sitting pretty and you don't have to worry about up and coming businesses. Most of the up and coming businesses are immigrant owned. Anyway, right? Every single convenience store, every single hotel, they've made sure that you're cut off from the traditional path to the middle class. Oh, and now manufacturing is going overseas. So screw you. Jump in, Dark, and then we'll go to Joe.
I was going to say, everyone should take a listen to the Myth episode that was recently done with Cody Wilson. There's an opportunity here if you have cheap power to reindustrialize.
I was just going to bring that up. Cody actually had, he had a real interesting take on this, which is sort of contrarian to the, sort of the darker aspects of the stuff that we've said. little stuff that's been real common in the doomer sphere for a long time. And, he sort of said, look at this, look around you. And, one of the things that's wonderful about living in a collapsing country is that collapsing countries, they can't do a lot of stuff for themselves. So you can identify something that America imports, for instance, and then just make it here. And then, you're well on your way. That's I do think that's the kind of thinking and that's the kind of stuff that you have to be able to do before you can get to all this other stuff.
Well, let's go to Joe. Jump in.
Oh, well, I wanted to say a few things. Number one, first and foremost, I think Fulwar, he brought up one of the most important topics that you can really discuss when it comes to colony building, and that's how the hell do we actually get people to move here? I mean, because I know there are ideas of, well, what if you have multiple colonies and all that kind of stuff? No, I think the most realistic option is maybe to have one. That's probably, considering the resources and system, you're probably going to get lucky just to have one colony. So you make a colony, or I think you called it earlier, it's possible to actually have a private town. So you get, I don't know, I got Mississippi on my mind because Fulwar mentioned DeSoto County. So we'll say somewhere in the town of, I don't know what we call it, the town of Confederate, Mississippi. We decided to found that, whatever.
Which is
Once
definitely going to be
in
Issaquah County.
I was thinking maybe Jefferson County, but
yeah,
or you could go scrape the bottom of the barrel and go Holmes County.
Don't you have a Lee County down there in Mississippi? Isn't there a Lee? I'm pretty sure there's a Lee County.
There's a Lee County in every southern state, I think.
Yeah, I believe there is.
I know there's one in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, and Alabama.
There's a Jeff Davis County in Mississippi, so.
Yeah.
But
there was a monument to Robert Jefferson Davis in LA County somewhere. Like, there's everywhere.
But let's say we found the town of, I'm being totally unoriginal, the town of Confederate. All right, you get it together. And, you got some people, let's say, probably within our circle or our, outside of our immediate circles. You get some people to move there. It's like the biggest problem is going to actually be getting people to move to the colony. That's probably going to be the hardest part. And you'll probably have to start out. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Fuller.
I'm done.
No, well, I was just going to say, I've seen colonies before. And, there is way out in the Texas, Louisiana, Texas border deep in the piney woods. A friend of mine and I were putting a boat in to, a reservoir. Good Lord, I can't even remember the name of it. The Toledo Bend Reservoir, world famous bass fishing. But of course, while we were doing this, we got lost, and this is like out in the boonies, out in the area of the country where your cell phone is not going to work. And of course, we ran into it was a colony, with a church and a flag, and the flag was the Confederate flag with a largemouth bass on it. But this colony, obviously it's very clearly a faith-based colony. But they weren't doing so hot, man, because it looks, as far as I could tell, the only economy was $5 a boat launch, and whenever some guys would come put their boat in, other guys in the colony would send their aging daughters out to sort of rustle up some change, if you know what I mean. And that's a situation you have to avoid. Yeah, I mean, you gotta make sure that's not gonna happen.
Well, see, that's why we're here discussing this, so that when we actually do get to this point, that won't be us. I mean, come on, man. Who puts a largemouth bass on a rebel flag on catfish?
Well,
I mean,
it should without a doubt be a catfish.
Have probably been poor for generations. With Corona making the idea of getting out of a city more popular and remote work making it easier to do that, you are seeing an exodus at least from cities, where people don't have to all go to Seattle or San Jose to get tech jobs anymore. They can just live in some suburb 50 miles away. If the off chance we have to go to the office, but 90% of our work is done far removed from the city.
Yeah, what Ryan said is true. And let's not forget step number 2. See, you're going to have the economics taken care of, before you decide to, to own one huge valuable piece of property with a bunch of other dudes. You're going to have the economics figured out. What did Mencken call it? He said what the right needs are, when he didn't say boxing clubs, he said cults of self-improvement or self-improvement cults. And we know how you climb and scrape your way into the middle class with no help from Caesar, I might add. It's, Dave Ramsey style. It's you create an emergency fund, etc. Well, the principles of microfinance is how you have really small rungs of your ladder as you're climbing your way up collectively. There's something called, the most basic one is called a ROSCA. A rotating savings and credit association, I believe. Okay. Usually about 15 people. And, what it does is it converts small savings into large savings, and that's all it does. Okay. These things have different names all over the world. There's a name for these in every language except for, English, it's called a partner hand. It comes from the Caribbean. But all it is, you meet on Saturday. Right, with 15 other people, and you all throw money into the kitty. And then it's someone that day is going home with the entire kitty. And then you work your way through all 15 people, and and what you're doing is you're converting over 15 weeks. You're converting those small savings, say $20 a piece, into large savings. And this is how, and you're like, well, why can't poor people just save in banking accounts? And it's because there's too many people in their lives that need money. Their children, there's ne'er-do-well cousins, brothers, that sort of thing. And so by saving for the partner hand or the ROSCA, they can tell the other people no. And so now they can convert small into large. Well, a ROSCA can turn into an ASCA. And I forget what ASCA stands for, but it's basically, it turns into a village bank where you become the creditor. The group becomes the creditor to capitalize the entrepreneurial efforts of an individual. And then that individual will pay back the village chest plus interest, right? You're turning into a bank. You're turning into a credit union or cooperative. And you start small and you work your way up from a ROSCA to an ASCA to a village bank, etc.
See, I'm glad you know about this because I've been thinking for a while now, if we did a colony, how would we actually start our own, local bank?
Yeah, there's a way to do it with small groups of people with small amounts of money. It happens in the third world. In fact, some of the most famous charities in the world spend their entire existence doing this in the third world, whether it's Latin America, Africa, India, Bangladesh, the Grameen Bank model, the famous Grameen Bank model. Kinder not Hilfe in Germany uses self-help groups. I think in India. Almost all of them are female-based because remember, nonprofits, they hate the male patriarchy. The international nonprofits hate the patriarchy. So they're like, oh, we're going to do this with women and we're just going to pay the women. And, but anyway, the Grameen Bank model, which was, semi-successful, it's a very interesting model. It works off of solidarity groups. And you're like, what are solidarity groups? Well, a solidarity group is a group of like 5 people where they all promise to pay each of their debts, to the lender. All right. They're jointly and severally liable, I believe is the old common law language for it. So, if, one of your group got a loan, your solidarity group, like say $250 and he owes $300, back to the lender and he can only pay $200 or $150, the rest of the group throws in and, covers for him. And then they take it out of his hide later and say, you owe us, or we're going to kick you out. So the great thing about solidarity groups, and this is why they do them in the third world, is because the bank, the lender, doesn't need to have a dossier where he keeps track of your credit history because it's your local solidarity group that has your back, and they know all about you and your drinking problem and your gambling problem and all that. They know all that, okay? And because they all know that and they're all on the hook in a contract to pay up in case you can't pay the full amount, the bank doesn't have to know that about you, and that is good. That is a good way to introduce anonymity, between the center and between your local group if you're forming one of these self-help groups. The guild, the association. You see what I'm saying? I know.
You swore you wouldn't talk about my drinking problem in public.
Yeah, right. But
I think every single one of us here was hoping he wouldn't talk about our drinking problems.
But microfinance is how you build. It's how you build, and you do
I have that problem
with the association or the guild before you make the colony. You're already making money collectively as a group. You're already getting to know who's credit worthy and who's not. And the great thing about solidarity groups, especially if you have like a big, lodge where everyone meets and they divvy back up into different solidarity groups, is that you can do sortion. What do they call it? Selection. Okay. So you could throw all the poors together and all the rich together, and the rich can go after bigger loans so that they can afford, their bigger businesses. And then the poors, the young, guys that wear motorcycle jackets, they can get smaller loans and beat each other up if they don't pay, in their solidarity groups. So the principles of microfinance have all this figured out. It's just English speakers that grew up in a developed country. They don't know anything about this stuff. Joint and several liability is an ancient common law concept. Very old. It's just we don't use it anymore because we thought we were too good for it. We have the free market, remember? But yeah, someone else jump in here. I'm just telling you, this is, the guild is making you money before you own property together.
I actually have a question for you because you had mentioned it earlier, but didn't get into it. I had mentioned something along the lines of, you just basically form a town, but don't incorporate. And then you said, well, you can incorporate, you just do it privately. I was kind of hoping you'd elaborate on that because I don't really know what that means.
Oh no, that's okay. Well, let's call the corporation. I don't know.
I don't know how you can have a private town in the United States.
Well, you just have a corporation that owns the property, and the roads are not open to the public. They're open to the members.
The Church of Scientology owns a couple towns.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, let's say you had a member-funded nonprofit that was dedicated to building this colony in DeSoto County, I believe, is the example we're using. Let's say, and what'd you call it, Confederate Joe?
Yeah, I said Confederate Mississippi.
Right. Okay. So Confederate Incorporated is a for-profit entity that made up of 50 people, and they're the owners, right? They're the member owners, or it could be anyway, cooperatives and mutuals you could sometimes use stock with these things, but let's not use stock. Let's just say the member owners, and they're all equal, and they buy up a piece of land that they want to develop, and it's just one entity. So far as the state of Mississippi is concerned, it owes taxes on that land, as one entity, but there's one holder. The entity is the property owner. Now inside, right, we have a boundary around, like Dark talked about, where you have a boundary between you and the outside world, which is falling apart. But on the inside, you conspire to create Anglo-Saxon democracy. You have little roads that you pave. You drive around on golf carts if you want to, so you don't run over the kids. There are no strangers driving down your streets. There are no pedophiles looking at your kids playing on the little playground next to the church. This is a completely owned village that is one piece of private property. Which is
the interesting thing about those Scientology towns is if they kick you out of the church, they can basically kick you out of a town for trespassing because they own it all.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is common, just no one talks about it. See, there's all sorts of things that are common that we're talking about. No one talks about it. Florida and Texas are filled with these private communities. Absolutely filled. It's like, no one under 50 is allowed to live in the villages in Florida, whatever those are called, where, Boomer Paradise, where they all like get drunk and drive around on golf carts and stuff. Ave Maria, Florida. It's a little far south, so there's a lot of mosquitoes, but it's all built on a university, right? It was the Domino's Pizza guys like, I want a Catholic university, and then I want a university town around that. And then there's going to be places for the faculty to live, that it's all planned. It's all beautiful. Texas has got a bunch of, billionaires building survivalist towns, frankly,
But Texas has plenty of room to do that.
Right. Yeah, what we're talking about is the future, and it's already being done. It's just being done by groups that aren't us, right? Because we're the losers.
Now we just need to do it.
Yeah, we need to do it. Exactly.
Well, I suppose, you're saying that we need to do it now. It'd be a good idea to discuss the actual best places to really do it.
Well,
maybe privately, but I'm talking about like regions.
I have a lot of hope for the guild. Okay, the guild can build the true like Confederate Freemason whatever lodges all over the South, and then gather their people into these colonies, which is really step 3. So I have a lot of hope, but notice that the guild is not like, oh, you're sacrificing everything to build this colony. It might come to that, but notice how it's about making money where you're at using the principles of cooperatives, and mutuals, like credit unions. Credit unions are so valuable that there is a class of corporate parasites that go around demutualizing them. All they do is they try to trick the customers, which are the owners, into voting to demutualize, and they offer them a lot of money to do it. And they're parasites. Go on, Joe.
Well, one idea is like say this corporation founds a private town, whatever. Well, let's say even if people who support it don't move there, they can still donate money to it. Kind of like how you buy stocks of a corporation, something like that. You're just basically giving money to that corporation if you support it.
Well, yeah, that's the for-profit
something
entity.
Like that.
Yeah, and that's why learning your entities is so important. If you have stock, if it's a for-profit, you're gonna have stock. Now, if it's member-owned, you have to be a member, okay, to get the services. So
it'd have to be someone that actually lives there is allowed to vote too. Otherwise, some outside entity can just buy your town from you and do whatever they want with it.
Yeah, and I'm old-fashioned.
It's got to be some place that the normies really don't have a reason to be. I know in my church, they own all of the streets around the temples, and like I mentioned this in a show in the past, but people would always protest the big Salt Lake City temple for whatever reason. They just hate us. So they would call the cops and have them removed because they own the road and they say they were trespassing. Eventually they got sued, and the reason they weren't allowed to kick them off anymore is because it interferes with some, whatever commercial activity that might be going on with people that aren't in the church. Because Salt Lake City technically isn't like the property of the church. It's its own sovereign town in Utah, which is its own state. So they can't claim that like it's exclusively theirs and they can remove you. So your town would pretty much have to be out of the way if you were going to do something like that. Otherwise, people that go through it that aren't like related to you will eventually cause problems for you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why being under the radar, which is what most of these colonies that I've described that are actually built by other entities, they're all under the radar. Have you noticed that?
Well, that's why I brought up the topic of, actually discussing where, which regions would be really good to actually start a colony that favors people like us. Like he mentioned, a place that normies wouldn't just move to. There's several places throughout the South that you could do something like that.
You need two things to do that, though. Before normies will move there, you need 2 things for sure if you're going to make this work. Number 1, reliable, fast internet. Have to have it.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 is access within a reasonable amount of time to like a major airport. So you can have people who, only have to go to, the big corporate office in Atlanta, once a quarter, but no one's going to live there if he's got to drive 10 hours to Atlanta, or he's got to do, and he works remotely and, goes once a quarter. That's cheap. People would do that. But if he's, way up in a holler in Kentucky and it takes him forever to get there, whereas it's like, oh, he just gets on an hour to a local regional airport and then he flies to, for $50 to, Hartsfield, and then takes an Uber to his corporate meeting, and then he's back home for supper. That's your 2 things that I would think. Does that sound about right? Which need is those 2 things?
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I mean, the internet is in, you can actually have internet piped out to you. Can't
You
think
get
of anything
satellite
else.
internet.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else off the top of my head.
Go
when
ahead,
it comes
Joe.
to the when it comes to the colony building thing, like those were really good points, and taking those into account, the type of area you're going to want to build a colony, and I've had to think about this for a while. It's you want to describe the area as the land that time forgot. That's really the best way I can describe it, because the internet thing is pretty easy to resolve. The airport thing, not so much. That kind of restricts you a little bit, but the internet is pretty easy.
Tennessee, because it doesn't have a state income tax, we do have these little airports, like billionaire colonies that they've built, where all the backs of their houses are, go up to the airport. So they all land their little private Pipers and Cessnas, and they get out, and there's a golf course there, but it's really hard to get there by road. It's really hard to get there and that's the way they like it. They want to play golf. They want to live in their mansions. They want their internet. But then they take the Piper airplane to Atlanta or to Columbia, South Carolina, quarterly.
Boomer waffle.
Yeah. Yeah. See, someone like Fuller could probably make money through investing, teaching, making media. So he could live in a very remote colony as long as he had good internet. And the trouble with satellite internet, like HughesNet, is the latency, right? It's 25,000 miles away into geosynchronous orbit. So, someone who's on the internet a lot would hate that, waiting. And latency. It'd be hard to do podcasting that way. But Fuller could live in a remote place. Most of the men we're talking about are guys. They're going to be loggers, plumbers. They're going to be guys that need to go out there and fix refrigerators, central heating units, right? They're going to be working off of a truck that they own, and probably for a company that they own, but they a little LLC they own, but they need to be within driving distance. So being within a spear's throw of the interstate is a good idea. Go on, Fuller. I saw you unmute for a second.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to.
Okay. But yeah, Fuller could probably afford the more you can do tech stuff, the more remote you can live. You can live in a swamp as long as you got a T1 connection or whatever that you paid to run out there, to your Kermit the Frog swamp. Our people, what they need to do, of course, there are remote places that have no business whatsoever, and Mississippi is filled with these places, right? As long as,
dude, there's tons of places like that in the Delta, anywhere near the Mississippi River.
Right. As long as it wasn't on a floodplain, you could probably build a colony, in one of these desolate places. And, as long as, there was a good enough public road that you could, rent seek off of to get to the interstate and do your business. And of course, if your family is safe in a healthy environment, being raised with your values, you're willing to spend another hour or two in the vehicle, to do your work as a man, because it's worth it. It's worth it. We have guys doing that now. I don't know how our people live. I see them barely struggling. You got to move another county over, because real estate is that valuable in Nashville, to where you can't own a home, but you got to still commute to Nashville. It's amazing what our people go through, the BS.
Another factor of colony building that I wanted to bring up, especially in regards to the, somewhere that normies aren't going to want to immediately flock to, is, you're going to want to go to rural areas with a lot of Negroes. Normies don't like being around blacks.
Well, I mean, that's if
but
you're
you don't want to be around city blacks, though.
Yeah,
they're going to be extremely violent.
They don't understand the Deep South, Joe. Most of these people on the internet, they don't understand the Deep South. Yeah, you want to live in Sampson, Alabama. Yeah, or some of these places I've been through, I call them take the pig trails, through the Black Belt. These forgotten little places. Yeah, those would be great places.
The land time forgot.
Yeah, right. Literally the land. It was like being in the 1950s or something. I remember going through one of these places. Now, I was young, and the family was traveling to do the classic middle class thing of going to the beach, right? So we had to drive through the Black Belt. And a little, black girl hit the side of of our van that we were traveling in. She hit the side of it, because she was trying to dodge like an oncoming car when she was crossing the road. She ran into the side of the van. Crazy story. Of course, we stopped and looked all around for her. And, but the attitude was so strange. It's like, you're a stranger, go away. You're a stranger. She's fine. She's fine. The paramedics are taking care of her. She just tipped a tooth. Go away. Right?
Well,
completely opposite of what would happen in the city, in the ghetto. I mean, it's like, hey, you owe us money. Give us money. Oh, we're getting mad. Well, you don't want to give us money? No, complete opposite. Just go, it's like being in the 50s. Weird.
This is in Crown Heights and you run the girl over and kill him, then, you can get away with it.
Yeah, rural Negroes are completely different from urban Negroes. It's two completely different types of people. Rural Negroes, if they like you, if just a few of them like you, it's just about like they all like you.
Yeah,
because most of them are related.
Yeah, I think the Black Belt's a great place to build these colonies. It's a wonderful place because it scares away the creepazoids. Those white parasites. They're like, oh no, blacks, run away. Yeah.
You just got dark was the night, cold as the ground playing in my head.
Well, the Black Belt is filled with these towns that are being abandoned because there are no businesses. There's a lot of beautiful little towns. You can build a colony on the edge of one and then revitalize the little town. Go ahead, Dark.
I was going to say there's probably towns in certain parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, or Alabama where you can just buy the whole town. There's places in Spain, like Galicia, where you could buy an entire town for like $1 million.
Yeah. Yeah, and it would be worth it. I mean, you could do that. Let's say you worked remotely, you were making money remotely. Well, then you instantly are bringing money into the town, right? So I bet we're not the only people that had this idea. I bet there's a lot of people that make money on computers, on the internet, that are moving to these desolate areas because they want to get out of Dodge too.
We're doing it right now.
Very seriously looking at moving. Of course, but I'm very seriously looking at moving to Natchez, Mississippi, because they're paying people to move there right now. And Natchez is, that's way back closer to where I'm from. And there's Springdale in Arkansas. I think that's the name of it. It's the other town next to Fayetteville. This is becoming a thing, with a lot of these towns are trying to revitalize themselves by capturing some of that, progressive class remote work revolution. But I have a sneaking feeling not many of them are going to take Natchez, Mississippi up on its offer, which is it's a beautiful town. I love Natchez.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, I'm convinced the best place to actually build a colony or a town or whatever is somewhere relatively close to the Mississippi River within the state of Mississippi. And I'm not talking about the Delta proper, like what's north of Jackson. Actually, I'm referring to what's south of Jackson. A little bit more hilly out there, but
Well, you're probably not wrong. Like, say Natchez, say you built a little colony, to live, on the edge of. I've never been to Natchez. Of course, the Natchez Trace is named after it. That's how old that town is. We were talking about one of the great, pioneer trails going through the South, the Natchez Trace. But if it's like a lot of other great towns that have seen better days, it probably has a beautiful square, and you could start putting businesses in there, and boutiques and all the other frilly stuff that you do when you're a gentrifier. Okay. It's just waiting there to be taken back over and to be beautified, through ownership. But the real revolution that we're talking about, and there's all sorts of things that I could spurg out on, talking about life inside the colony. Once you start thinking collectively, which is the last thing that Americans want to do, but once you start thinking that way, it's like, well, what do you really need? It's usually 2 meals a day with the family, right? You eat breakfast, and then dad runs out the door to go earn a living. And then he comes back, and then y'all eat supper together, right? He usually eats lunch, we're close to wherever he's working, and you eat lunch either at school or at home if you're staying at home. Well, one of those meals could be collective. That's what the Hutterites do. They have a industrial kitchen, where all the men come in and all the women come in. They all sit on picnic tables and they eat together, right? It's like eating in a restaurant, except it's not for profit. All the women gathered, they cleaned up the kitchen, and they made a big meal for everyone. And you can do stuff like that. There's all sorts of, the possibilities are endless, because you're no longer one person versus the world, which is what you are now.
Well, one reason I feel so strongly about the colony thing is, I'm in my mid-20s, and within the next few years, I'll, be very much willing to move somewhere. I'm like Fulwar in kind of that sense. I'm very much willing to move somewhere. So it's just like, the idea of a colony is very attractive to a guy like me. Especially since, I'm not particularly too interested in, a huge house and all that kind of stuff. I'm more interested in land and a community.
Well, you've got the right attitude, man, because you would be a richer man, living in a small house in a wonderful community than living in a big ass suburban McMansion with a swimming pool and all that crap in a community where there is no collective planning. There is no collective ownership. The neighborhood is just, everyone's just waiting to sell to a stranger so that they can run off to Florida. The community, you can own all sorts of things collectively. Americans don't realize this. But when you have a high trust society of people that all believe the same God, they're of the same ethnicity, it's like you can have a lot of like collective property now, and it's taken care of, right? You can have, instead of each man has his own pool in the background. Oh, we've made it. We got our own pool. Well, you can have a really nice little pool at like the community center, and everyone goes there, and it's taken care of, because there's no strangers that are going to come in there, graffiti and trash the place and steal out of the lockers. You may not need locks on your lockers. These are the sort of communities we're talking about, because it's collective, but it's private collective. It's a gray area that Americans don't ever think about. They think of private and then they think of public, right? Well, what about it's public, but it's not really open to the entire world the way the American public is now? It's just you and your neighbors own it. You and your neighbors own the church and take care of it. You and your neighbors own a community center where the kids can all swim in one great big, saltwater swimming pool, whatever the latest tech is, right? Maybe you don't sit around and, hey, you don't need a TV, right? Hey, you don't need a TV because you wouldn't use it. It would be better to have a little, big ass TV at a rec room at the community center, because, it's sort of like the people that live in small houses today. They got burned in 2008 or 2009, so they're committed to living in a small house. What do? They outsource their life. It's like, I go to the gym and that's where I shower. I go out and I eat with other people. I don't eat alone in front of the TV, right? It's a better life. You sit out on your porch. Oh, the house is hot, You sit out on your porch and you wave at people walking down the street and they stop by and they talk to you. That's the way America used to be. We had richer communities and smaller homes. I mean, am I speaking Greek? I know I'm spurging out here, but this is,
you're not wrong about any of that. But, I've made this point multiple times. I'll make it again. We aren't as rich as we think we are. Okay. That where you're having to move, drive through 2 counties and spend 2 hours each way in the car just to get to your office job in Nashville. Those boomer homes aren't really worth what they're worth, because they're really worth $500,000, because what's going on is the federal government is utterly dependent on that building or that place staying worth something so that the boomers don't revolt. Okay. What we're really dealing with in terms of not only just everywhere else being completely unaffordable, but we're also dealing with the fact that only in a place where something's real are your assets going to be protected. It's we're looking at multiple levels of failure here. Fuller and I were John the other day. Do you realize that the only asset class that anyone under 40 has ever made any money in really is Bitcoin.
No, now GameStop.
Well, okay. Yeah, but like,
But
They lost all that now. It's gone.
No, I mean, dude, it's true. But did you see the side note? Did you see the thing? The Wall Street bets guys have actually been real clever. They've spent 10 years being wrong about everything, and now that they got something right, they didn't miss a chance to, really endearing stuff with it. And, like a lot of the guys that made cause, some of these guys printed 50 grand in a day. They've been signing up to adopt, gorillas in Africa. And they've had something like 500 gorilla adoptions in Africa. Now, of course, the black pill behind the cute story is that, quote unquote, adopting gorillas in Africa is actually probably just funding sex trafficking. But it is at least,
That's all foreign aid in Africa goes to.
Yeah, it is.
There was some guy, some UN official recently got prosecuted because he oversaw the rape of 60,000 women, of him and his subordinates combined in 10 years.
Right. But if you want to get to the real red pill, there are a couple of red pills about Bitcoin that are, that you got to sort of see through. There's the Fed story, the Fed story. It's an extremely volatile asset. And then there's the Bitcoin maxi narrative, which is this decentralized currency is going to challenge everything we knew about money. It's first, there will never be a non-inflationary currency. So get that out of your head. And what Bitcoin really is probably it's a Fed glow up of some kind or another, of one kind or another. And, the
CIA made it, right?
Yeah, Satoshi Nakamoto. Yeah, get real. This is a CIA slush fund, money laundering operation that just got out of hand, but they're perfectly willing to let it get out of hand because, I think I've made this point. Bitcoin has made 93,000 millionaires worldwide in the last 2 or 3 months. It has been very effective. And this is one of these things I've started noticing because there's not too much different between the Bitcoin crowd and our crowd, except the Bitcoin crowd. A lot of them have gotten really wealthy off their fixation. And a lot of us have just become, essentially political prisoners. And
waiting to go to the gulag. Yeah.
Yeah. The reason the government is perfect, there's always question, is the government going to regulate crypto out of existence? No, this asset that is relatively small cap still, there's about $1 trillion in Bitcoin, which is a lot of money, but the government has sort of decided to keep it open as a roulette wheel for, disaffected white guys. And, occasionally, because they've been locked out of everything, it's sort of like how if you've got somebody, it's that old Sun Tzu argument that, you always give the encircled army a way to retreat. Bitcoin is the approved method of retreat out of the circles. You've got all these people that have no reason to buy into the system. But, you let them leverage their STEMI check. You let, 50,000 of them leverage their STEMI check. What's going to happen is, 25,000 of them are going to lose the whole damn thing. And, that STEMI check, no longer counts against your inflation. Just got sucked up in the money vacuum. Another 10,000 probably lose money and the rest make money. And a few of them, and these are going to be the really clever ones, are going to make enough money to where, they're no longer a political threat to the established order because they just became a part of it. It's a real sinister trick, but, you gotta play the ball where it lies.
And it's not totally anonymous. People are finding that out. The blockchain money that you can track the ownership of actually can track who owned it. Oh no. So
there are definitely ways there are ways to make it anonymous, but yeah, I mean, anybody who's anonymous, no, it's actually exactly the opposite of anonymous, you know.
Free Talk Live got
people
rated,
think that,
by the way.
and it's going to attract the kind of person that wants to do anonymous financial transactions, which of course makes it a perfect honeypot.
Right. But you know, I mean, it is what it is, and it is a speculative asset that, you know, if you're good at technical analysis and you have the time to sit there and trade it, you can make a lot of money. If you're good, it's sort of like what William Faulkner said in Absalom. And what I learned was there was a place called the West Indies to which poor men went in ships and became rich if they were clever and courageous. You know, the way speculation's always been.
Well, you know, most people.
And what he doesn't say is that most of them died in absolutely miserable conditions with sand in places that they didn't even know they had, of some sort of weird disease.
Right. But you know, Cody is bullish on Bitcoin. He might fall into the category of people that are true believers. I'm a little more cynical than he is, but I do, you know, I think I've said this probably 4 shows in a row now. Though I do think maybe the top is presently in. If it comes back down, you know, it may be able to do this again. You know, it's definitely one of those things that people shouldn't just discount.
What's the classic investing?
You can always do boomer crypto and buy pallets of 5.56 ammo in the hopes of trading it for canned food when the economy collapses.
Boomer crypto.
That says boomer crypto.
Good luck finding a 5.56. Yeah.
Well, the boomers already bought it all, right? So now it's doubled in value. The boomers can sell it on the internet.
Oh, dude, you know, that one is back in stock here. In fact, there was both of the states that I've checked. That one is back in stock. 30-06 back in stock. 9mm back in stock. The stuff that you can't find now is the stuff that I use. So like 20 gauge shotgun, because they, you know, in order to
16 gauge is the hardest.
Oh, well, yeah, just 16.
Because I use 16 gauge.
I 16 gauge going for $5 a shell right now. But the reason for this is that, you know, the company spun up all their extra capacity to sort of, and there are still plenty of places where you can't get 5.56, but you know, the ammunition factories have, like, you know, retooled everything, and they're only making those, you know, calibers. So you can, around here you can find 30-06, 12 gauge buckshot, 9mm and 223, 308. You can find all the regular stuff. But if you want anything that's even just a little bit not regular, you know, you're shit out of luck now.
What you're saying is when in your colony, and you got a couple guys that are good with their hands, start an ammunition factory and just print money.
Just reload.
Yeah. It's not a bad idea.
Well, hopefully we don't have total collapse, because then the Bitcoin millionaires are going to be useless to the colony. Right? Like, who's this guy? Oh, he's the Bitcoin millionaire.
Well, you don't have to necessarily use
off the internet.
Bitcoin either.
Okay.
It's worth pointing out also that the good Bitcoin millionaires don't stay Bitcoin millionaires very long. They just become regular
Yeah, you're gonna have to cash in at some point.
Yeah, I'm just saying
it's not long term; it's short term.
It would be all right if most of the people in the colony were engaged in, I don't know, production or farming or you know, something useful.
I mean, that's a big part of building the colony.
Imagine explaining what you used to do like 10 years after collapse, like we're in Fallout world, and everyone was like, well, you know, before the collapse, I was a plumber or I was a mechanic, and like, oh, what did this guy do? Well, you know, he was on this thing called the internet, you know, with imaginary money, and then he lost it all. I'm like, okay.
Right, he's an insurance claims adjuster. I'm like, okay, whatever that is.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'd rather
they told him he could be anything he wanted, so he became an insurance adjuster.
And you can get a job, you know, whatever, like say working at a bank, but you still need to know a trade. You know, because if, like, let's say that colony does build, you're going to need to know a trade, especially in the early processes of building that colony.
You're
going to need your plumbers, your painters, your sheetrockers, your carpenters, everything else.
Yeah, the beautiful thing about the colony is you're solving for pattern, right? So I don't know what the future holds. Maybe it is, the complete collapse, that the libertarians
Is it?
see the solving for pattern. We cannot trust anything from here forward. Most of the stuff that CNN says is just, it's blatant lie to your face for fun and profit by psychopaths, right? I mean, they're just lying about everything. Yeah, the election was rigged.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a CGI president.
Yeah, we got a hologram as the president of the United States. Everything is
We're
is
like
a lie.
in like third world junta mode, but with like cyberpunk, but not the cool parts. We have like robot people. You'll just have like remote control dildos and like hologram president.
Right.
For those of you that played role playing games, what we have
is Joe Biden even alive anymore?
Worst parts of Shadowrun, but gay.
Yeah.
Well, where you
I
going
was
to
going to point out, in every RPG, I play a bard.
No, in Skyrim, I definitely played at Nord.
Oh, that's video game RPGs, Joe. You're a child.
Yeah,
Well, we're talking about D&D stuff.
In the mid-90s, so...
Yeah,
I
we're
was
talking about...
right at that weird cusp of millennial and Gen Z, so I don't really know where I belong.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But I will... What I'm
I just
trying
had a girlfriend when people were playing games like that. That's what I...
What I'm trying to say is you can actually grow real food for the first time in your life and taste what unpasteurized food tastes like. Real food. Unpasteurized beer. And you can eat, healthy food. You can eat, grass-fed steak and get your organic greens that have never tasted, pesticide. And, you can actually increase your sperm count and feel like a man for once instead of eating whatever poison is masquerading as food that they're feeding us right now, that are driving down.
Yeah. They're feeding us. There's literally articles about how people's penises are getting smaller and sperm counts are crap.
Oh, dude, look at the food pyramid. I can't talk for some reason. Look at the food pyramid that they give us. Ever since forever, they've been telling us, oh, well, the most amount of food that you want to eat is going to be your grains and carbohydrates. No, you need to be ingesting a whole lot of freaking protein and dairy. You need a lot of protein, a lot of dairy, and then some veggies and some fruit. You can probably do without everything else and a little bit of carbs. But the amount of carbs that they tell you to intake is extremely unhealthy for you.
Well, dude, I'm on the grain-free diet now. I'm not even like what is that? Gluten. I'm not even gluten intolerant. I was just like, no more grains. It's not keto because I'm not like putting myself in ketosis or anything like on purpose or anything. I just don't eat grains.
If you're a grown man, the basis of your diet should be protein and dairy.
I call it the early American diet is what I call it. I never tire of pointing out that people think of the 19th century subsistence farming. This is especially true about the South. Because the Southerners never really did much subsistence farming. They were farmers, but they were not subsistence farmers. Even the corn that Southerners grew in the past, they didn't eat themselves. They either fed it to cattle or they sold it on the open market. They would devote almost all of their, and this got us in a lot of trouble eventually, but they would devote almost everything to cash crops, and they'd have like an orchard and then like maybe a garden or something like that. But, Americans traditionally consume way more red meat than we do now. Way more. And that's just, that's from wild game and that sort of thing. And, they got huge. They got swole
strong
on
for a long time in the South. Like deer were extinct. Yeah. Like the deer you see in South Mississippi are not native. The deer you see throughout much of the deep South is not native.
I think they're native. I think they were nearly wiped out, and then because like if you talk about hunting and fishing and everything, the golden age of American game, American outdoors, game life and that sort of thing is the early to mid 20th century. That's whenever we did things like introduce rainbow trout to all these different rivers and everything like that. And, because we've heard rainbow trout, not native to it's native to the United States. It's not native to most of the waterways of the United States. But we stocked a lot of rivers with fish that didn't live in them because there was that was what people did. Outdoor recreation was what they did. Especially in hunting got really big. The golden age of American hunting, was the 1950s because people would come back from World War II. And, they got so used to killing men, they just got to kill something. And, deer and wildlife and that sort of thing hunting was a thing that all of those people did. And then the boomers just dropped the ball on it. You'll run into some really famous boomer hunters and that sort of thing. But boomers hunted less than their parents, and Gen X almost stopped doing it entirely. Millennials do it more than Gen X.
A lot of the really good game in the South was completely destroyed in the Great Depression. Whatever was left of it, because the South existed in the freaking Great Depression since like 1865.
That's true.
Don't even get me started on the Reconstruction period.
Oh, well, let's get back to the topic. We've been recording for, I guess we've been recording for a couple of hours now. So, and I think I've said most of my piece. I'm sorry if it was, if I was too dark or mean or whatever, and trying to hammer home my points. Go on.
Okay. Well, anytime I think, we can go there. Anytime you think you're being insufficient, or anytime that I think I'm being too cynical, I think, am I really? I think about the worst things could possibly be, and think it's probably worse than that. I put on my forward glasses and go, yeah, it's probably worse than that. And then I remember that most of our churches are essentially real estate holding companies that have sidelines in money laundering and importing refugees and or molesting little boys. So, whatever you want to, however you want to, you don't want any part of this system. That's what I'm trying to tell you is no matter how it shakes out, no matter what happens to it, things aren't looking good for you, heterosexual white dude. Okay. It is set up to be, dependent on your labor while it hates you, and set up to literally end your, ability to, it wants you to eat a bunch of food that causes your dick to shrink, your sperm count to crash, for your kids not to be yours because, Tyrone had to, your equipment didn't work well enough, so Tyrone had to do it. You got to raise them.
Tyrone's ain't going to work either. He's living in the same country as you.
Well,
you have to import people.
Yeah, okay, fine. That's to import Nkwala from
If you
Tanzania.
think the forward glasses are bad, I can get worse. So I can.
All right. Well, anyway.
Yeah. Ryan's seen the future and it doesn't work. So.
I've seen the future and it does. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll make your colony, and then the government's just going to put estrogen into chemtrail planes and blast it all over the Great Plains in the Midwest, and you won't be able to escape it.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. I was feeling thank you for my hope flattening session of the day. Anyway, no, I mean, this is something I've talked about a lot. Some of the stuff I've ever most proud of that I've ever done is on this topic, and I think that this is something we really need to start thinking about seriously. Is figuring out a way to secede from the system, secede in your mind, and then secede with your wallet, and then from there, then we can start really building something. Because I've talked for a couple thousand hours on the internet, and that has been fun. It's been useful, I think, but. The most important thing is for people to actually get out there in real life and do it.
Yeah.
I concur.
Go on, Joe.
Oh, well, one thing that I wanted to bring up about the colony, before we get off of the podcast, we mentioned earlier about how, the church is going to be a major, town center. What denomination is that church going to be?
That depends upon.
Time for a tough question.
No. It's not that tough of a question, but that leads to another strategy, and I'll go through it real quick. All right. There's nothing that Christians love to do more than fight one another, right? They don't, what scares the crap out of a Christian elder is dealing with, a young woman who wants to be promiscuous. He's scared to death of her, but he loves attacking other Christians. He does that all day. So, I would recommend that, you create something like what's called a parachurch. I believe that the Catholics call it a confraternity or a sodality, whatever you call it. It's not It's not a church doing this, but it could. If you wanted one church to do it and the whole church was into it, they could do it. But the clever thing, I think, would be you get the white guys together in something like a fraternity, and then you insist that to get the churches on board, you insist that to be a member of this fraternity, you need to be a member of a church, right? And so the churches will be like, well, damn right. Yeah, you need to be a member of the church. We're more important, than a fraternity, right? But that fraternity, since you're all like white guys with traditional beliefs, say you're all fundamentalist Christians, you actually create competition between the churches to be more based, right? Because if a preacher starts, preaching about how, women need to be empowered more or whatever, decides to have a female preacher, then you just, the guys in that church that are in the fraternity are like, hey, do you know of any other base churches that I can attend? And I don't really care whether it's Lutheran or not, because what does it matter if you got a female pastor there too? Okay. And so you create competition among the churches to be more based because they want your high quality fraternal members, right? You're doing what the communists did to our society, put little cells everywhere in all the non-party organizations. We'll do that to churches. And I'm just telling you like it is. It's like, oh, how dare you? The church should be first. It's like, well, I don't know. If the church put the men first, you wouldn't be creating this opportunity, would you? It's because you've decided to worship, women instead of God, that you've created this great opportunity.
One of the issues with our, the South is largely going to be low Protestant. So one of the issues with our Protestant churches today is they're not particularly all that great at getting their, men who are members and their women who are members to actually have families. You know what I mean? Like, the girls go off and they, we don't have to talk too terribly much about how American women are today. They go off and do their thing, and the guys, do their thing, and they don't end up getting married and having kids.
The UN has studied this exhaustively because they've tried to lower the birth rates in the global South, right? And so they know all the predictors of fertility. They leave off religiosity. Right? But religiosity, I think, is the number 2 predictor of whether or not a woman's going to have kids, because it co-indicates, or it coincides with all these other indicators. The number 1 is marriage status. Okay. So, and when you look at American women, why aren't they getting married young? Because they really want to get married, but they don't want to marry. The truth is, and this is the hard truth, okay, the women don't think the men are good enough. They think they can do better. Right? So they cohabitate instead of marry. Because Prince Charming's going to ride in and he's going to have $1 million. Right? And they watch a lot of TV. Culture tells them they can do this. So they don't want to get married. If you conspire to raise the income of the men, you are going to make them more attractive to the women. The younger the women get married, the more children there are going to be. And all this.
But the thing is, if you got a decent guy, let's say he works out, really good dude, has a good job and everything, does he really want to marry a girl who slept with every dude in all the town? Everything that's got a heartbeat?
No.
Not really.
You cut off debauchery by getting married young, and that goes for men and women, right?
Good luck convincing churches of that.
Oh, I know. Churches are all wrong, but they're all wrong on so many things. See, we wouldn't be living in hell if churches actually believed in God, right? If they actually believed in the Bible and they believed in God and they believed that men should rule over their household and that, men should rule society and everything else the good book says, we wouldn't be in this problem. It's because they betrayed their godly values for money, power, the usual. They let the world in, Well,
I'm convinced my grandfather's generation is the last generation of preachers who had any teeth, because, being raised in Baptist churches, I can tell you they're not going to, teach that in a sermon.
Well, the fundamentalist Baptists would. The what do they call it? Independent fundamentalist Baptist churches, they would. But what's the problem with those? The problem with those is they tend to be dominated by, one family. They almost become like a family cult, and they don't work well with others. So what I'm telling you is like, you need to become the communists, have the fraternity be like the communists, but, you're pushing reactionary traditional fundamentalist values instead. And, there will be competition between these churches about who can be more based. And it's not, I'm sorry to tell you this, churches, but you're not in the driver's seat of our society. You should be, but you're not, because you gave it up. All right. You decided to put mammon before God, and this is your reward. Okay. So it's perfectly legitimate for a group of white men that are trying to survive in this post-apocalyptic, West, for them to demand that their churches abide by the book or the tradition. If they're, one of these high churches, was it Anglicans or Catholics or Orthodox, you will abide by our canon or by the good book. And, if you don't, we will leave your church and go find one that will. Thank you very much. And then I guess the preacher won't get all that great off the books, untaxable money anymore, because he's lost his, he's losing his sheep. And, I'm not to be mean or anything, but it's like, you got to lead is what I'm saying. Have the sodality, the parachurch, the confraternity, whatever you want to call it. Have that religious organization of men lead the way, in building the colonies, and then the churches will catch up. And I'm all about having a church at the center, of society. Where there is altar, there is civilization, sir. But it's going to be up to that specific group of people what that church is. I'm open to, trad Catholics are going to want to survive, or the new Orthodox that are sweeping the nation. They're going to build colonies too. And Baptist, which is the number one denomination in the South, Methodist is number 2. Some of them are going to form colonies too, and they're going to do it their way. But notice what matters. What matters are the fundamentals. And fundamentalism is younger than modernism. It is a reaction to modernism. And what are the fundamentals? The fundamentals are about what? Sex, what race. God made nations and tribes. Thank you very much. And you, Babylonians that want to meld everything together, you're spitting in God's face. And, you're going to lose because you're making him angry, right? So, yeah.
Go ahead, finish.
No, I'm sorry I'm getting into prophet mode here, but it's the fundamentals that will unite the Christian fraternity. It's not Armenians versus Calvinists, Augustinians versus whatever, it's got going on in the Catholic Church. It's not, all you Catholics are going to burn in hell. I got the Protestant true belief. It's like, we'll see who God, we'll see whose side he's on when we see all those beautiful children running in fields, when he blesses you. Right? He blesses you with children and with wealth and with a home that doesn't blow away like the leaves in autumn. We'll see who gets the blessings of the Lord. It's not going to be, the guy that, spent his entire life, raging against Catholics, sir. It's going to be the trees that produce fruit. Sorry. Go on, Joe.
Well, we're talking about what kind of church would be good for the colony. I mentioned I'm in my mid-20s and, I'm unmarried. So I'd be very much willing to move within the next few years. I'm not going to move to a colony if the church doesn't have any teeth. If it doesn't have any, for lack of a better term, balls. If it doesn't have any balls, I'm not going to, why would I go there? It'd be the same as any other Protestant church I've been to. They have no balls.
You're better off. Honestly, you're better off like renting a house with your bros and watching Steven Anderson's sermons on Sunday than you are going to a Cook church.
Yeah. Yeah. But, even the high churches have a tradition, what is called a parish council. Okay. So let's say that, the board of the corporation that formed the colony in the first place, let's, they're like, all right, we're going to have an assembly. We're all going to be members of this church, right? It's our colony church. And so we're going to elect a parish council, and they're going to be making decisions, including decisions about doctrine, making sure that the clergy, whether it's a priest or a preacher or a pastor, whatever you want to call him, making sure that he is preaching the right way. And if he's not, then he can go on his merry. And I know that's anathema to these big organized hierarchical churches. But I think that's the way it ought to be. I think the colony ought to own the church because there is no difference, right? We can't afford all the separations that, our late society, has. We have a separation of church and state. It's like, why? You know,
that's a lie. Well, sir, just one moment. That's a lie.
Yeah.
There is no such thing as separation of church and state. That is a lie from the pit of hell. That there is no such. Every society is a theocracy, and every society is an oligarchy.
Absolutely.
It is a lie from Satan's own mouth that there is such thing as a secular society. No, sir.
Yeah.
No, sir.
Absolutely right. There's no reason. The courtroom is designed like a church. Have you ever noticed that? You know, the defendant is supposed to stand at the altar.
Everyone has a God.
Yeah. Well, the choir box is the jury box. You know, the seat or whatever the bishop sits in is the judge's bench, right? That meeting house, it should be your town council. It should be your courtroom. It should be your schools if you can hack it. And it should be your church, right? Just have one at the center, it's the center. Notice that the churches are the center of all the medieval towns and villages, right? That's the way it should be. It's that way in the Bible. The Bible recognizes no difference between secular and religious law. You can't separate good and evil from God. It comes from God. He decides what's good and evil, right? So how can secular people or godless people decide for you if you believe in God? They can't. So, I mean, just the only distinction that the Old Testament recognizes is it recognizes that the leaders of the 10s, the 50s, the 100s are separate from the priests, right? So you can have militia leaders that are not chosen for quote unquote religious reasons explicitly, but because they're good militia leaders, But those judges, the law that they're upholding is going to be your religious values, your religious law. It's going to be the Bible. It's going to be the church canon. I'm sorry, I'm spurging out again, but this is the future. The past is the future. You understand?
Well, and here's the thing. As Christians, we need to form these Christian communities and what have you. Any successful community has something that they're about. Okay. And, our elites have their elite communities. They have absolutely, they're all about making money, and all these successful colonies, all these places that are your rulers live in, they're not for us. And they have things, and their thing is, their book that they care about is the Talmud, or it's the Wall Street Journal. It's something. It's not what you want. So what we need to do is figure out a way to live for us. And that's all we need to do. I mean, I'm about out of batteries here, and we've talked quite a bit, but, just be successful. That's all we're asking you to do. There's hard work. Hard work is, everybody has to do it, but would you rather do the hard work that puts your children in a place where they can be successful and they can live and they can thrive? Or do you want a place where, your family name is wiped off the face of the earth, and your great grandchildren, if you have any, are, pink haired, face full of piercings, they're Afro, Latinx, Eskimo, trans, and, your great grandchildren are dogs. Like, what do you want? Cause if you don't change, that's what's going to happen. Sure as shoot.
Right. Like, it's almost when you're a founder, you don't get to see it.
You don't get to see the promised land.
Say again, Dark?
You don't get to see the promised land. Moses didn't get to see it.
Right. But it's like, hopefully you'll be buried in one of these colonies. And then, twice a year, someone will go out and take care of the graveyard, just like all our communities used to do until yesterday, or until the boomers came about. And, they'll mow the grass, they'll clean up the graves, maybe have a picnic, Day of the Dead style, whatever your community decides to do. But your grave will be there generation after generation, and it will be honored, and it will be taken care of. If you do not have these colonies, then your grave is going to end up in one of these city cemeteries with McDonald's wrappers blowing across it.
You'll be in one of those new banana peel coffins they got.
What's a banana peel coffin?
Oh, it's biodegradable so that you eventually just like rot away into nothing.
Oh.
Start hurting the environment.
Oh. Might as well just bury someone in a burlap sack. I know environmentalists don't want that.
No, I mean, that's pretty much a shallow grave.
Well, it's whatever you decide as a colony. You know, you can get cremated if you want to. You know,
Or who was it that said this, you won't have or you won't have cemeteries. You'll just have like a flash drive of like all of your Instagram pictures in like a giant like cloud, and your body will be incinerated and like ashes flow into the ocean or something. Just dumped into the water, basically.
That sounds extremely gay.
Yeah, well, it sounds very Soviet. You know, they were really into incineration of bodies. You know, as a way of getting rid of religious burial.
The cemetery will be in the cloud.
Yeah.
Just your Facebook tribute page. That's what you're going to have. You're not going to be able to visit anything.
Well, yeah, the Soviets, our elites are still pushing the latest version of the Soviet Union, like they always do. But yeah, the colonies are the only place that are going to last, or can't have the ability to last, because we're in the midst of the greatest going out of business sell in world history. America is going out of business, and everything must go. And so everything of value is falling apart. And where's the money going to come from to fix all those TVA dams? I don't think it's coming from anywhere.
Lol, no.
Those dams
I read somewhere that almost all of the engineers that maintain nuclear power plants are hitting retirement age, and they don't have any replacements.
Yeah.
No American ones anyway. They just got nobody.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do with that? They're just going to let it blow up one day, or are we got to ship it off somewhere?
Well, theoretically, you'd have to pay France and Japan have a great nuclear tradition, engineering tradition. So you'd have to pay those people a lot of money to come over here and fix our stuff.
That ain't going to happen.
Yeah, where's the money going to come from? We don't produce.
There's going to be Chernobyl everywhere. That's the black pill.
Yeah, the dollar has value because you can buy OPEC oil with it. That's why it has value. It's not because you can buy American goods. You know, what American goods do we have to sell to world markets? We got corn.
And dildos.
The number one export of America is soy.
Yeah, well, soy.
Like, come on, man. We're literally exporting homosexuality, smaller testicles, and a smaller dick.
The number one value export is aircraft parts. Then soybeans, then oil. So it's not that bad yet. You know? I think airplane
Oh, yeah,
parts is one
well.
of those things. What an autistic thing to have as an export, you know, a top export. Though still, we're just not, you know,
like
as bad, you know.
implements and like faggotry. That's
It's just
basically
Yeah, I would like to point out though that, you know, as much as we talk about the deindustrialization of America, American manufacturing is gone, you know, we import everything. You know, America still is the number 2 manufacturing country in the world, and significantly more hostile than China is to foreign imports. So like, as bad as you think everything is, it has only begun to get gay. You know, we're still number 2 in the world by a solid margin, and still relatively autarkic. You know, like the backsliding that you've seen in the last, 15, 20 years, that's just the start.
Well, I'll just say this.
Well, if you want to talk about American exports, like, let's talk about how the de-Christianization of the world has basically been because of American influence.
Well,
I mean, the Middle East is significantly
USA
less
stands for
Christian because of America.
I don't know about that. I mean, the United States is significantly more religious than Europe was, and Europe has basically been an atheist continent for 200 years now, more or less. You know, it's their religious participation has been down in Europe for a long, long, long time. I don't know if we can blame Americans on that.
I'm going to
atheism
filibuster against you.
When the Europeans started inventing things like nationalism, European style nationalism is explicitly atheistic. From
one aristocrat talking to another, I'm going to filibuster against you for, contradicting my point.
Yeah. Well, world atheism peaked around 1976 or something, and it's been in free fall ever since.
It's actually a 19th century phenomenon. It's something people don't, so you see the new atheism or whatever was like a super mega gay attempt to revive it. But I mean, atheism properly understood is kind of a 19th century phenomenon.
Yeah. Or 1930s, it's sort of godless, communism versus fascism.
I think of, it's kind of, the USSR is kind of like, the 19th century's Frankenstein is really kind of what it outlived the fucking creator. But that's
organized atheism is extremely gay. Like, my generation tried to get back into it, and it has failed miserably.
Well, it's just a bunch of Jews
it's extremely
now.
gay, man.
It's definitely a very Jewish inflected, version of atheism is what new atheism was. There was.
You're talking like,
Harris.
Yeah, I was gonna say the 2000s. It's just like the cult of Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris.
And Hawking.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ryan remembers all that, but those people have been non-entities for how many years now?
Yeah,
it's been a while.
I run into people online, and they're still like, you see the YouTube crowd in particular, like they're still like making YouTube videos, like debunking Steven Pinker. And I'm like, what? Who? Who is that guy?
Well, my impression with these guys is that, there's been a void opened up by by libertarianism just collapsing to the left, just surrendering to it. And so, these are the guys that didn't want to go, into identitarianism with the rest of the alt-right, so they wanted to maintain a right libertarianism, but not call it that.
They were basically branched off of, like, when the alt-right became, like, the Nazi LARP thing, they were like, oh, I don't know about this. They basically, like, bailed out and tried to make, 2008 libertarianism trendy again.
It wasn't even trendy in 2008.
It was basically a Ron Paul cult back then, but without Ron Paul, it's kind of like, it's Sargon and some other people I forgot.
This is a crazy thing that I never get about those splinter right movements, from the libertarian movement on up. It's just been in a relentless shit fight over like 2% of the population for the last 80 years. It's like, come on, guys.
I think David Rubin was a liberalist or something. I don't remember.
Is he the sodomite?
Well, that's not very specific, talking about like splinter right organizations and stuff.
Yeah. Could you be more specific, Fuller? Well, if he is gay, that explains the animus toward Christianity, right? It's like there's always some sort of there's always some sort of underlying characteristic.
Why these people become atheists is they're just butthurt over something. Like the couple of them the one that grew up in evangelical households were just like losers or weird, or they hated their dad.
Yeah.
And the ones that weren't, they're just like gay Jews.
It's not like homosexuality is any real obstacle to remaining Christian at this point. I mean, the Vatican is a giant gay colony.
Well, not officially on paper.
But being Catholic is too hard for them. I don't know.
Well, it always comes down to there's a guy they hate from when they were a kid. They hate daddy, or they hate that coach that verbally abused them.
They hate
or
Chad.
Something.
That's it.
They either hate daddy or daddy sexually abused them, or they hate a coach or a coach sexually abused them.
Right.
Or they hate a priest or a priest.
Right. It's like
that's basically it.
Yeah, we're getting close to the etiology of this disease. It's there's a high correlation between homosexuality and childhood trauma, sexual predation. Yeah. And so that's how they reproduce. They turn kids into homosexuals who then prey upon other kids when they get older.
I managed to both elevate and then piss off all of the Catholics in the audience in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, you've been awfully randy for the past 45 minutes.
Easy go.
Oh, I'm a good old rebel, now that's just what I am. For this fair land of freedom, I do not care a damn. I'm glad I fought against it, I only wish we'd won. And I don't want no pardon for anything I've done. I hates the Constitution, this great republic too. I hates the Freedmen's Bureau in uniforms of blue. I hates the nasty eagle with all his brags and fuss. The lying, thieving Yankees, I hate some worse and worse. I hates the Yankee nation and everything they do. I hates the Declaration of Independence too. I hates the glorious Union, 'tis dripping with our blood. I hates their striped banner, I fit it all I could. I followed old Mass Robert for 4 years near about. Got wounded in 3 places and starved at Pint Lookout. I caught the rheumatism of camping in the snow. But I killed a chance of Yankees, I'd like to kill some more. $300,000 Yankees are stiff in southern dust. We got 300,000 before they conquered us. They died of southern fever, southern steel and shot. I wish there was 3 million instead of what we got. Now I can't take up my musket and fight 'em now no more. But I ain't gonna love 'em, that is certain sure. And I don't want no pardon for what I was and am. I won't be reconstructed, and I don't care a damn. Oh, I'm a good old rebel, now that's just what I am. Oh, I'm a good old rebel, now that's just what I am.
Crush damn urbanite.